Hello.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome to the chat. Welcome to the stream. How's everyone doing? How you doing, Sean?
I am doing excellent. Just moving around a few overlays here, responding to chat, saying thanks to Christopher. He's saying we're awesome. I assure you, it's mostly Joe. So, but thanks for sharing that. No, much appreciated. So, and then James is looked like he's giving me some advice on how to save some time moving south to live in America. No thanks, you guys have more cases of COVID than we do right now, so I'm just going to stay here in Saskatchewan for right now. No offense to the Americans, it's just safer right now here in the Canadian region. So it's just how it is. So
Yeah.
what's new, Joe? Give us an update on the eye situation. How are you feeling?
Oh man, eye situation is not really changed. It sucks. I'll be honest. It really sucks. But I'm just sitting here waiting, doing six different applications of two different eye drops each day, and just waiting to go back to the surgeon and seeing if the next time I see him in 3 weeks, we could actually schedule a surgery. Basically, just waiting because of COVID. So
Okay.
it is what it is. It's kind of a bummer, but yeah. So rocking the shades, gonna continue to do that for the foreseeable future, I guess. So
Gotcha.
um, but yeah, so not really great on that front, but I did manage to get a couple of TTS games of Legion in
Okay.
over the last like week and a half or so. So that's been something. Been excited about that. Got some
Nice.
stuff to talk about.
Excellent. I've
And
got zero TTS games in, so over the course of my lifetime, so we're good there. Yeah.
yeah,
So
well,
it's
I mean, hey, you got to do what you got to do during the quarantine, right? So at
yeah,
least we're able to play. So that's what we're doing.
yeah, for sure.
Um, And then, yeah, man. So I just kind of wanted to talk about some lists and stuff. I do want to, since I know some people, we've gotten a ton of messages.
Yep.
So let's talk about the poker chips because Sean, you can if you want
Uh,
to say something about it,
yeah.
give an update maybe.
Sure. I'll take it away. So as you guys know, I've been pretty much responding all week to every message that's coming in, just letting you guys know that we were connecting or trying to connect with the United States Postal Service. So Joe and I actually managed to nail down an individual today. It's very difficult to get through. I think we tried 3 times on the call to get through, kept getting hung up on, recalling. Anyway, long story
Yeah,
short,
long
let's
story short, we
we
just
got
not to
somebody.
interrupt you, but we did a three-way call. So I
Yeah,
called Sean and then we called the post office. So
yeah. So it's not fantastic news. I just see that I have a camera freeze on my end. I'm just going to see if I can see what the heck's going on there. But I'll just keep talking. I think you guys got me on audio, but I think my oh, there's just Joe.
hey,
I'll just keep talking until I sort that. I'll work with the other hand. So anyway, Joe and I did speak to an individual today. His name is uh, just
Mike.
yeah, fair enough, random postal man.
Yeah, yeah.
And let me just center that. There we go. And so what we did was got a hold of him, explained the situation again,
Mhm.
and he was able to at least start doing some preliminary looking around for us. Like I said, it's not good in the sense that like he kind of gave us the token, like, oh, that doesn't sound great. Yep, that's why we're calling. I'm
Mhm.
not really sure where those things might be. Okay, also why we are calling. And so he was going to make a phone call as soon as he got off the phone to somebody that he knew would be able to give him some information, as well as follow up with the boss above him. Now, we instructed this individual to give us a call back tomorrow, so we're not playing phone tag. So we're waiting on that, and we're just really hoping that someone can track it down for us. It's just really weird because the system's not really registering the packages that we have dropped off. And so they gave us lots of like, it's skeleton crew, it's thin, it's this, mail's moving slowly, but nothing really hard and factual. It's really, they don't know. And so
Yeah.
when we say we don't know, that's because that's kind of what we're being told. But we have said, hey, listen, we have waited long enough for this. We've done everything we can on our end. Um, dropping it off into the to the mail system, and so now you need to do work on your end. And so he is going to start the process. He's the right person to start the process. There is people above him. We're going to be in contacts with them tomorrow, hopefully, and we're just starting to kick it up the chain. They know the value. They know that the time lapse is even long for a delay, and so they need to start looking on their end. And so it's frustrating for us for sure.
Yeah.
But we can't go into the facility to look for them. We know what they look like, but they don't. Once the guy kind of had, I mean, we were on the phone obviously, but at first he didn't really remember. But then he's like, yeah, so what package is looking? And we're like, well, it's 132 packages actually. And he's like, oh, so some
Yeah.
didn't arrive? Well, no, actually none of them arrived. Oh,
Right.
and do you have tracking numbers? Yes, we have 132 tracking numbers. Which one would you like? Well, just give me one.
Hmm.
Hey, we give him
Hmm.
one. Is it going to this address? Yes, it's going to this address. So you know that these are relevant tracking numbers. Now, arguably, this
Right.
isn't the guy who's screwed up, and he's probably not the guy who's going to physically go pick them up. But he happens to be the point of contact, so he has to kind of get some of our frustrations. Although we were very cordial with him, but I felt when we got off the phone, he was very sympathetic and had a plan of action. He also knew that we were going to follow up with him, so he is now the most responsible person for our inquiry. And so we're going to make sure that he either does something for us or gets us to the right people. So we're not trying to beat this guy up. This is his day job, and nobody likes to be called to do that. But we wanted to make sure that you guys knew exactly where we are, and we'll update daily because we're gonna basically follow up with this guy every day now that we kind of have a guy pinned down that we can make responsible for tracking it through the system. So that's kind
Hmm.
of where we're at, really.
Yeah. Not really great news, but it's what we have. So, yeah, this is the second time I've spoken to this guy. This time I actually did the three-way call with Sean just to be like, "Hey, man, I'm trying to talk to this guy." He seemed to have escalated it, but man, the post office just moves really slow, and they don't really care, and we're doing the best we can with
Yeah,
them.
we kind of
Because
gave
we,
him we kind of gave him
yeah,
the shock value on the sticker value on this. Be like, okay, so this is
yeah,
how much the product's worth that's in your mail system that you are going to need to be responsible for replacing. So like even if we lose the
yeah.
postage and we got to remail, that's fine. But
Hmm.
the value of those tokens is well obviously important to us, but it's important to you guys as well. But it's not like we can just run out and grab another stack off the shelf. Like there's an order
Yeah.
process and a wait process, and we don't want to go through any of that. I don't even have my tokens. No one has their tokens. It doesn't matter if we mailed some domestic, like obviously they're going in the U.S. or Canada, and we have some that are first class mail going to international customers, and none of them have moved either. So it's not even like they're in
Hmm.
two different sort bins and like the domestic are slow. They just
Yeah.
haven't done anything with this. And so once we told them like I said, the sticker value of that, the volume of packages, and he picked up on our frustration, and hopefully you guys can pick up on our frustrations as well. It's not whether you are or not, we're frustrated. It's just where we're at. So we want to be as transparent as possible. But if we don't have any news, it's because we have no news. And so it's not
Hmm.
really relevant for us to post every day. Nothing new today because it sounds like we're not doing anything. We're doing something, and this is the most up to date. Literally, not even 2 hours ago, we were on the phone with these guys.
Yeah.
So we'll work through it. So anyway, that's
Yep.
our preamble, and we want to make sure people do that. Please direct people back to the podcast if you see a question pop up and you have heard this and you see that comment, because sometimes I miss those, and then I have to get 40 private messages that Joe and I need to clear through. Not that we mind private messages, but we are just trying to be as transparent as possible. But we may miss a few messages. It's not us dodging. We're relevant. Our
Hmm.
faces are up here every week. You can track us down if you need to. We're not trying
Yeah.
to stiff anybody. So um, let's hope not. Dennis is saying that they're behind the filing cabinet at the post office where you drop them off. If they are, that is going to be unacceptable. So
Honestly, I hope it's that simple.
yeah,
I wish they were.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
We'll
I mean,
see,
we
man.
we, we threw it down. We were like, hey, did somebody like steal our packages? He's like, well,
Yeah,
I hope not. Now the thing is,
yeah.
this guy that we're dealing with, he works at the facility where it was dropped off. So if
Hmm.
that happened, that really means that he's on the hook for sort of tracking that. Like it's at
Yeah.
your facility. So anyway, that's rant over. But let's just hope we get this sorted out because we have so many more things in the pipeline that we'd like to do. But we're really reluctant because we don't want to we don't want anyone to think that we're not sending stuff out. The silhouettes are arriving, so you guys know that stuff is going. It's just really bothersome that the silhouettes jumped the queue on the tokens, which we shipped 31 days ago. So
Yeah.
anyway, I
Yep.
might have to make a trip to the United States, even though the border's closed. I'll get through somehow and start greasing the wheels at the United States Postal Service because this is ridiculous. But
Yeah.
I digress. What else do we got for cool news? Hey, I know what we can do.
Hey.
Let's give something away to a subscriber.
Yeah. That's
Eh,
good.
Yeah. So let me just people are like, what? There was a random giveaway. Let me just bring this up here. So if you guys didn't catch on Saturday, we dropped Cad Bane special. And so Joe and I did about an hour-long show on that. You can find it in the channels. Probably just scroll down a little bit on the Legion Academy page. It was fantastic. Like I went back and checked the numbers, Joe. 92 viewers that day. So
Yeah, live.
like
Yeah,
what
that was
a
like our
crowd.
highest engagement
Yeah.
ever.
I mean, there is
So
26 people hanging out here, so that's fantastic as well. So not to downplay the numbers that are here, but super engagement Saturday afternoon. People were obviously they were there for us, but secondarily they were learning about Cad Bane.
mhm.
And so we got some of his cards spoiled, all of his cards, in fact. And so you guys can go check that out. But on the Cad Bane special, we said we were going to do a giveaway to any YouTube subscriber. And we're actually approaching, we're like 6 or 7 away from 500. So that's a nice little milestone to share.
Yep.
But what we said is anyone, it didn't have to be in the Cad Bane special, any one of our subscribers, we'd randomly pick and you'd get 4 silhouettes. And we were going to send out one of each faction. I did a draw here beforehand. And do you want to announce the winner, Joe? You got it in your,
Sure.
you got it in your messenger there.
Yeah. All right. So let's see here. It looks like Brandon Gunnels or Gunnels. Brandon Gunnels. Congratulations.
Yeah. So
you've been randomly drawn to
Yeah.
receive 4 silhouettes.
James is indicating, hey, James, you know what? Go subscribe anyway, because this is not the only giveaway that we're going to do, and then you're in for all future giveaways. So you were too late, but I already drew this one anyway, so it wasn't just being drawn now. But I do encourage you to go sub, and anyone else for that matter. So it helps us out a lot there. So yeah, so Brandon Gunnels just needs to contact us. Hopefully he's going to listen to this podcast. I think he subscribed about a month ago. I think it went next to his name. So not a really old subscriber, but not a brand new one either. So good for him, and he'll get 4 silhouettes. We know that they are shipping, and will surpass our tokens likely here, but we'll get those out straight away to you. So we'll pop those in the mail with the next run of silhouettes. So just let us get that done. And yeah, so that's the first of the giveaway. We'll do some other stuff as well, maybe for some Legion Academy t-shirts, maybe even some more boxes. We've done some boxes in the past, so as the new units come out, hey, maybe we'll do a Cad Bane when Cad finally drops. So
yeah,
that'll be super exciting. Joe and I are also going to do, just so you guys know, we're going to do an unboxing of an AAT. I am due to have some arrive here prior to Friday, so when they arrive, whatever day that is, I will, Joe and I, will jump on and we'll do a little unboxing of the AAT, just in case you haven't seen it. I haven't seen too many unboxings for them just yet, and I'm eager to get them out of the package and see what's in the box. We know the contents, but just physically getting a model in hand will be cool. So that's relevant. Before we jump into content, I actually got a couple packages today. Joe, I got 2 more overhead mounts here for studio, and nice. I have a nice pole that's coming that's going to allow me to span 2 tables. And what does that all mean? It all sounds real fancy, but if it's not in the Legion context, it's irrelevant. What that means is Friday Night Fights, we will be able to actually simulcast 2 games at once. We'll obviously only have one up on the screen, skirmish level, but we can do both a skirmish and a full 800-point game, whatever we choose, 2 skirmish that being. So just a nice way for us to have more content, more Legion games going on, and kind of bounce back and forth, a little ESPN style, so you can see a couple games going on at once. Players will be side by side, so it'll be a nice interaction and feel of gaminess going on here. So I think people, when we get back in that spirit, I think having lots of games here in the studio will be super fun for people who maybe haven't got any games or maybe can't get any games for some time. So that's exciting, and it's just going to make the content a little bit easier to share out here. So yeah, so that equipment is arriving, because that's one thing you can do. You can still online shop during the COVID era here. So so all that's just been arriving, and super fun. So I've done a kind of a revamp here in the studio. I've completely changed around the gaming area, so it's a lot more wide open. And then on the other side, I'm actually opening that up as well for additional filming space. So I'll show you guys all that in the future. But that's just some relevant studio news, I guess, if you will.
Nice.
Okay.
All right. Let's jump into Legion chat.
Okay, where do you want to start? So we were going to talk, Joe and I had kind of had this idea with not being a ton of new stuff. And sorry, Al Paz. So Al's saying, did I hear games at Sean's house? Yeah, everyone's invited except for Alberto Paz, a friend of the show, downgraded to acquaintance of the show. But Al's throwing some back alley Legion is what I heard in Chicago. So you can head there for the less let's say structured Legion games. So breaking quarantine, not breaking any quarantine I hear, Al. So just you'll be here in a few hours. Oh, what did I start here? But yeah, so Joe and I were talking about content, and what we thought we might do is break down and over the next 3 weeks or so, and talk about deployments, objectives, and conditions. Talking about the old and the new, and kind of what we were thinking about doing was kind of ripping through and saying, first and foremost, is it in your deck? Is it not? And kind of giving the context. Hey, if I'm taking this, it's in. If I'm taking that, it's out. If I'm red, I want to avoid. If I'm blue, I'm taking it, and kind of work our way through. Kind of skip all around. We'll give different insights. Joe and I play different lists. We have different opinions about things, which makes the show much more enjoyable. That we're not yes men or agreeable to each other. In fact, we get into some quite good discussions about, what if you take that? Well, I'm going to do this. And we get in quite a few of those. Yeah. We don't record all of them, although they would be interesting. But we may get in a few of those conversations tonight. So, all right, Joe, we are going to go objectives. The board is yours. Where do you want to go? What's up first?
I want to talk about payload first as an objective, because I've played a game of payload recently, and I have some thoughts on just kind of the general meta and then payload in general. Okay. All right. Let me paint a picture.
Okay. Well, let me preface first, because you're going to paint the picture. Let me just paint the scenario just so everyone knows. So just in case they haven't read or seen payload. So this one here is a setup starting with the blue player. Each player places a bomb cart within their deployment zone. Each player controls the bomb cart they have placed. Then starting with the blue player, each player marks the piece of terrain by placing one objective token matching their opponent's color on that terrain piece. Each chosen terrain piece cannot be within a deployment zone, but can overlap a deployment zone. At the end of each round, starting with the blue player, each player's bomb cart may pivot and then perform a speed 2 move if there are more friendly unit leaders than enemy unit leaders at range 1 of it, meaning the bomb cart. The victory is at the end of the game. Each player gains 1 victory token if their bomb cart is at range 2 of the terrain piece marked with an objective token, matching their color. 2 victory tokens if it is at range 1 of the terrain piece, or 3 victory tokens if it is in base contact with the terrain piece.
Yeah, so this is kind of a weird one if you guys haven't had a chance to look at this or play it yet, but let me just basically paint the picture. So again, we're playing this game on TTS, so keep that in mind, I can't remember the name of the TTS map, but it is an older one. It's not one of the ones from the current season of Invader League. I think it was an Endor map, but I might be wrong. It might have been some other planet. But long story short, if you're looking at the center of the board, just off the center, there's a very large like rock formation that's completely line of sight blocking, and it kind of has a slope going up from like the one side of battle lines, a slope going up from the other side of battle lines, and then it's a little distorted with multiple tiers on the top, but it's mainly just like a large oval that's line of sight blocking and takes up a big chunk of the map. And we're playing advanced positions, so we have the L-shaped deployments, and we all have Scout 1. And so ultimately what you have to do is blue player places their bomb cart down in their deployment zone first without knowing where your opponent is going to choose for the bomb cart to actually have to end up at the end of the game. So my logic was basically like this. I'm looking at the board, I'm looking at the deployment zone, and I'm thinking it's probably best for me to put my cart sort of centered in the middle of the table, because if he picks the farthest piece of terrain on one side or the farthest piece of terrain from the other, I'm in the center, so I'm kind of equidistant to both terrain pieces. So I place my cart, he places his cart, and then we each need to take our token and pick a piece of terrain. And so you obviously want to make it so that your opponent has to travel the farthest like legal distance that they can. That seems to be the logic, right? Because it's only going to move speed 2 at best every turn one time. And then based on the range away that it is at the end of the game, that determines how many victory points you score. So you're just trying to make them have to move the farthest distance is usually the logic. What I found was that both of us were essentially going to have to move about the same distance because we both sort of centered our cart. But the thing is, we were going to kind of dance around one side and the other side of this giant line of sight blocker. So I knew he was going to kind of bring his army across the one side, and then I was going to kind of bring my army across the other side so we could avoid shots at each other and kind of do, try to like safely escort our stuff as much as possible. Now, I was playing a Dooku triple BX Vibro Sword squad, so I was going for the aggressive like Scout 3 into the charge and just try to have like an extremely explosive melee push. And then I had like a ball of E5C B1s. So my logic was I'm going to use my E5C B1s. I'm going to try to push my cart safely behind this giant like mountain, and then I was just going to dive on his army the best I could with my 4 melee melee units, Dooku, and then the 3 full squad B1 or BX commando droids. He ran triple rotary RTs, Cassian K2, and an airspeeder. And so if you think about my list from what I said, I have absolutely no answer for armor whatsoever. Not to mention 4 pieces of armor. Like, I guess Dooku is kind of an answer for the ATRTs, but if I'm going to charge the ATRTs with the commando droids, I'm fishing for crits. If I'm going to shoot at them with E5Cs, I'm fishing for crits. And if we're talking about the airspeeder, my commandos can't charge it. Dooku can't attack it. And my B1s basically are just stuck fishing for crits. So I felt like I was at a massive disadvantage just based on my list choice going against this.
Is this just in, Joe? Airspeeder may be the best unit in the game?
Well,
just saying, might be the best unit of the game.
Well, here's the thing. So let me talk about it. So so I'm looking at triple rotary RTs, an airspeeder, and then he's got 3 rebel troopers with DLTs, a Cassian and K2, and R2. So my melee skew that I was diving with had absolutely no problem dealing with the infantry as they should, right? Like I dive on his rebels and I just like annihilated them. But he's got three ATRTs that are very healthy and an airspeeder. So his ATRTs are just slowly chipping away at my commandos and just killing them. You know, like 1, 2 at a time every time they shoot at them. You force them to roll like 4 saves with reds, they're just probably going to fail like 2 of them statistically. So that was happening, and you know they only have 1 health each. They're expensive, but they only have 1 health each. So there's only 5 of them, 4 of them, depending on how you kit them out, and they just eventually die, right? And then what was happening is like, so I'm moving my whole B1 blob together with my cart, and his airspeeder is just one-shotting like a B1 squad, like one at a time, and just kind of strafing back and forth and picking off these B1s who are trying to push my cart. And I'm not really stopping him from pushing his cart because he's still got 3 pieces of armor and the scraps left of his rebels just scoring it and outnumbering me. So ultimately, we're like, it's like, okay, we're holding both of our own carts. Turn one, they both move. Turn two, they both move. Turn three, they both move. Turn four, mine stays put because I've got one B1 squad left and he's got an airspeeder capping the same cart. So it's a wash. It doesn't move. And then he's still got his 3 ATRTs and then like K2, who's about to die, but still a unit leader, and his cart's moving. And I'm like, well, the second that your cart moves and mine doesn't, I know I'm going to lose. Because I don't think either of us are going to table each other. And you're just going to get that one step closer to your deployment zone, which is basically all it's going to take. So we played the game out, and ultimately it was like, I just lost my last B1 squad, and then he's just pushing both carts, or just like seizing the movement on my cart completely. And I'm on the other side of the table with the scraps left of my army, and I can't stop him from moving his. So the point I'm trying to make in general is that I would have ruled out many times in the past, I would have ruled out like a heavy armor skew and thought this list is probably not that good, right? Like I'm not really super worried about an airspeeder and 3 ATRTs in a game of like recover the supplies when you only have 3 rebels. But in this case, because armor moves the cart, you can cap the objective with your vehicles, not just troopers. His armor skew, with me not having an answer for that, was extremely effective. And I think that's like the big thing about payload is that, yeah, if you're running like a vehicle skew on payload, I think you're actually really at an advantage. And if your opponent is not taking impact and ion, it's not going to be pretty. And that was my exact case. Like I very rarely had a time in this game where I felt like I needed to tech anti-armor, and having all E5Cs and like melee characters against like a unit, an airspeeder, which I literally can't even attack with half of my army because they're melee, is devastating. So that's my thing. I think the meta's changing, and I think you look at something like payload, and if you want to take like a heavy armor skew, you totally can. And I think like airspeeder and triple rotaries or land speeder and triple rotaries, something that's fast and armored that can get to your back objective and really like harass it while you're slowly moving your front objective. Like there's a lot of plays there. Um, I think you can say the same thing if you're running like double AAT or single AAT and triple staps, or like what's the Empire equivalent, even triple bikes and an ATST or something. It seems really skewed and something that we would have ruled out as being competitive in the past. But when you put it up on an objective like payload, all of a sudden you start to see it really shine. So that's something I just wanted to comment on. I'm like, man, I really need to start thinking about actual anti-armor tech, because armor's here in a big bad way. And I think if you're bidding and you're building lists around like certain objectives, you can really just kind of auto win if your opponent doesn't have an answer.
Okay, I'm.
So
I don't want to jump the queue here because I said Adam joining us from Australia had a question, and probably in a roundabout way, Joe's response will come back around to what I want to talk about, because Joe talked about the placement of payload,
mhm.
and picking the mathematical point, and then I have just a kind of another thing to maybe consider around the placement of that. But his question, Joe, was to Legion Academy. That's us. What faction does this objective favor? And so you talked about maybe fast armor. And maybe having a large unit with a couple small ones. So if you're kind of running down top to bottom, and now just keep in mind, before somebody picks this apart, we're going to talk in context of an objective, not coming in with the deployments and the conditions
Yeah,
piled on, right? So we're
because
just looking at the singularity. That changes the calculus of this entirely, but we're just going to
yeah.
kind of focus in on this to kind of do a 3-part series and then talk about them all encompassing. So just take these as the objectives. And of course, we can't talk about every scenario, but let's go top to bottom, Joe. Which factions in what order do you think are favored in payload?
So I actually want to shift that and say I don't think it's necessarily about faction. I think it's more about specific types of list inside of each faction. Because I really think each faction has lists that are going to be really strong specifically on payload. But just based off of my like limited data, I just want to point out that I think if you're skewing heavy into armor, you're going to probably do well on payload if your opponent specifically doesn't have an answer for that. And what I've noticed in general is not a lot of people are always building in answers for like heavy armor skews. So I'll say, like, for example, the list that was really effective for the rebel faction was the triple rotary and an airspeeder. And I would have said a few months ago that an airspeeder is not competitive at all, but when you see it perform on something like this, specifically against my list, I'm like, okay, that's really strong. So I think looking at like Republic, for example, I think running like a saber tank plus some ATRTs, as much as that gets really expensive with points, if your opponent doesn't have impact, like they're not going to kill those things. And those things are just going to like slowly push your objective along, and it's never really going to slow down. And like the saber has the ability to delete things at range 4, and when it moves a huge distance and then can still shoot at range 4, so it's going to be able to pick off stuff in your backfield. I also like the idea of running, like, I've seen Paul Watson do this with great effect, and it was ruled out as something that probably wouldn't be competitive, but on an objective like this, it really is. Saber tank and 2 barks. Again, expensive. You cut out a lot of infantry. You take like 2 Overwatch phase 2s, Rex R2, and then like maybe a naked phase 1 or something. But if you're playing an objective like payload, it's going to be almost impossible for them to push that saber tank off, and you're going to just flank with your barks and pick away at their cheap stuff. And all of a sudden now, if your barks aren't dead, you've got 2 barks capping their back cap, and if you can kill 1 or 2 of their units and you've split their army up, all you got to do is kind of tie them. I feel like the way you win payload is to just stop your opponent from being able to move 1 time without them being able to do that to you. That's almost always going to mathematically get you to your point faster than theirs if you just can find a way to get your payload centered on the deployment.
Okay,
Because really, yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
let me just jump in here. So my approach to this, and so you make a good point. You say the way to win this is to prevent your opponent from moving the payload. So let me just present this theory to you, because I'm talking about, if you're going at this with heavies, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the more heavies you have, probably the less activations you have. Just generally,
Yep.
probably about a 2-for-1 kind of deal for the most part. Now, what do you think about when you're placing that piece of terrain, or you're placing that sort of that target for that payload, I look at the logistics of the table. And so if you look at how you score points in this, it's range 2, it's range 1, it's physically touching. So
Yeah.
scoring 3 points in this is likely going to, well, it's going to give you max points unless you have some other way to sort of secret mission or something like that. But I look at, can you place that marker in a position where actually base contact with a piece of terrain becomes exceptionally difficult? And it becomes exceptionally difficult because you put obstacles in the way. So let me just say, for example, Saber Tank is nearly range 1. So a Saber
Hmm.
Tank that is just off the target objective, target piece of terrain, becomes really hard to A, base it, and 2, to be within range 1. So now you're limiting your opponent to potentially, even if they're just touching your saber, to be at range 2, so therefore scoring only 1 point. You don't have to have any way of stopping the payload other than physically stopping it. You don't have to have more unit leaders next to it because it just can't move. Yes, it gets the pivot, but every time you're pivoting to move horizontally, you're likely not gaining any distance on the actual target. So when I'm looking about placing
Hmm.
it, even though it may not be the most mathematically distant location, I'm really looking at the geography of where I'm placing that. What
Yeah.
can I put in the way? Then, by
Yep.
doing so, I can use a saber tank to effectively run a huge screen. It doesn't need to kill, it just needs to be not killed. And again, that goes to your point
Hmm.
where if you don't bring something to kill armor, then you may have potentially some issues around that. And if you are able to, I just have a camera freeze there, FYI. But if you are able to get in the way, that's something that
Hmm.
becomes a great way for you to defend the point. Then you can dedicate units to moving your payload along, even if you got to take the long way around. It doesn't become too much of an issue if you're able to block your opponent. So when I'm looking at double saber list, initially I thought, geez, double saber and payload is not going to be great. I have so few units that can kind of bump my objective along. I'm going to really struggle with scoring points. However,
Hmm.
if I'm able to block up with 2 sabers, the potential for my opponent to get near that scoring point, I don't really need to care too much. If I win 2-1, that's fine. And it's not really that difficult, I don't think, to block up. Now, of course, it's going to really be largely dependent on the table, and there's lots of variables. But when I'm looking
Yeah.
at it geographically, my consideration is how much blocking can I do to that payload? How difficult can I make it for my opponent to move it along, as opposed to just conceding the fact that it's like mathematically the farthest point? Because as you said, all they have to do is just keep moving it. And if they're moving it, they're probably
Yeah.
winning it. I don't think that's the
Yep.
case if they're having to take the long way around. The second you make,
Yeah, that's true. So that's true. Like,
yep,
so let me just for our game, for example, like, first of all, the payload can do a free pivot, um,
100%. Yeah, 100%.
which is cool. But in our case, we essentially once we pivoted on deployment, we were just moving in a straight line. So we're taking two like intersecting paths
Right.
this way.
Yep.
If he had to make an L shape with his speed 2 move, then yes, that would have slowed his progress down. Same
Right.
with me. And then yeah, if you can create some sort of giant screen with like 2 AATs or 2 saber tanks, and now your opponent is just stuck having to move around this like wall that you've presented, or you can even do this with the occupier tank.
Yes, so that
Um,
that was my point I was going to
yeah,
make. And also, let me just throw this at you. The saber tank can do this probably better than most. Well, the AAT as well, for one simple fact: they can strafe. You take an L,
yes.
you move to the side. The saber tank just strafes. It's in your way again, and it's prevent that distance that you're making up with that speed 2 maneuver is cut in half, probably at best. At best, you're
Mhm.
making up half that distance. And so you don't need to screen a lot. And you can actually flex your saber out first to make that card have to change direction early and then just be in the way. And I think it's an
Yeah.
actual really good tactic in payload to be able to use a single unit to effectively delay. I don't care if you have 4 unit leaders, that's fine. You're still going to be able to move it, but I'm dictating potentially where you're moving it, or at least you're not able to move it freely without having an obstacle in the way, a moving obstacle.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, for
just
sure. So I just think, yeah, in general, armor seems good on payload.
yep.
That's That's what I've been thinking. I'm like, man, it's really hard to kill armor if you're not planning your list around being able to be good at killing armor.
Right.
And then that's just, unchecked potential to just escort something.
Yep.
I've seen this, man. I've seen this all the way back in even like long before Vital Assets came out, where I was building lists that were, like Death Trooper Bosk Stormtrooper lists or Shore Trooper lists that were really, really, really good at killing other Stormtroopers and really, really, really good at killing Death Troopers and stuff with all the pierce and sniping and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But man, you go up against like a double tank skew and you just get like completely shut down. And
Yep.
I'm just like seeing that come back all over again. And now there's like new objectives that make armor skews even better. So just keep that in mind when you're building your lists. Like if you go to a tournament, I think you should expect to see some of that, just based off of what I've been hearing, at least locally. Like that seems to be the way things are going. So,
All right. Well,
yeah.
we're ripping through these objectives clearly. So let's move on to the second one you want to discuss. We got lots to talk about here. So where do you want to go with the second one? Because I think we covered payload pretty good. There's still lots to talk about for sure. But in the interest of talking about something different, what do you want to talk about? We got sabotage, we got recover, we got key, intercept, breakthrough, hostage exchange, bombing run. Bombing run we could talk about.
Yeah, bombing run's interesting too because
again with the vehicles too, so that's kind of relevant.
Well,
yeah,
it's the same concept. Do you have an armored compulsory move vehicle? Because if you do, it's probably pretty good on bombing run, right? Like bombing run. So why don't you read the card, Sean?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right, so we got. Let me just bring that up here. I got so many windows open. Let's add some bombing run and got it. All right, so bombing run, a little blurry here, but let's have a look. Setup after the deploy unit step, starting with the blue player, each player places 3 claimed objective tokens in base contact with friendly unit leaders that are within the player's deployment zone. Each unit cannot have more than 1 claimed objective token. New paragraph. Each trooper unit gains the claim action, and all units gain the free drop action. Flip one of the unclaimed tokens to the claim side. At the end of the activation phase, each player may detonate 1 unclaimed objective token that was flipped to its unclaimed side with the drop ability by the unit they control. The victory here is after an objective token detonates inside or within range 1 of each player's deployment zone, the opponent gains 1 victory token. It detonates at range 1 area effect, 3 red, blast, suppressive, surge, crit.
Yeah. So right off the bat, you notice that it's not specifically the deployment zone. It's within range 1 of the deployment zone. So not quite as far, right?
Right.
And then when you combine that with something like a hemmed in, let's say, where you're already starting, or like a danger close, where you're already starting super close together, man, it's easy to score.
And just a question on there, Joe. Just for clarity's sake, just keep in mind that this again says just friendly unit leaders, doesn't specify type. And there was a question I had, so that it says unit leaders that are within the player's deployment zone. So let's just say, I know we weren't talking about other deployments. Just curious though, on rollout, where you can actually place your vehicle outside of the deployment zone in rollout, would you be able to not have a condition on the vehicle?
Ooh, I'm not sure. I gotta be honest. Like that's a weird one. I would assume you can.
Because is this skipping? It says may deploy within range 1 of a friendly deployment zone. So that would be where it deploys. But then in bombing run, saying that it says that unit leaders that are within the deployment zone. So maybe in that particular case, if you want to start your vehicle with the condition, maybe perhaps it must be within the deployment zone.
Yeah, that's really strange because, man, I'm thinking, does that apply to scout?
Well, I mean, for scout, you deploy in and you move out, correct?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that would be the deploy. But for rollout, that again, not getting in out of the deployment zone, that one just says each vehicle may deploy within range one. So that's like it's not really it's not a scout move for vehicles. We call it that. We've equated it to that, but this is
Hmm.
straight up different in terms
Man,
of
that seems like it seems like you found one of those weird RRG need to get a bullet point added
we've
to the
gone down the
RRG.
warp. Yeah, we're
Let's
in.
define deployment zone
Yep.
to say that it's the I don't know.
I mean, my goal in
Yeah,
life is to break things.
break the
So,
game.
yep,
All right.
yep, fair enough.
Heard it here first, folks. I
Yep.
don't have the RRG open, therefore I don't have deployment zone open. Maybe there is already a sentence in there. I don't know off the top of my head. I haven't even thought about that yet because I haven't seen that combination come up. But man, talk about talk about something that's going to get rules lawyered in a tournament until they clear that up.
Yep.
Thanks, Sean. I
Where are those clear token bags when
I
you need
can't wait
them?
for I can't wait I can't wait for my opponent to tell me after I've fully deployed my army that that was illegal. And
Yeah,
yeah,
just
yeah,
just
we'll see.
just reference us here. See Al Paz, a friend of the show here, saying he won his game, a game one in Invader last night, doing bombing run, advanced position, and limb viz.
Well, there you
And
go, man. I'm Lim Viz in bombing run is just like the dream, right? You can't
yep,
shoot me turn one, and I'm coming at you, and then turn two, I'm in,
yeah, and
right?
Dustin
Like that's
And Dustin's
yeah,
pointing out here, deployment zone doesn't change though. You just deploy outside of it. No, I don't disagree with that. It's just that line that's in bombing run that says
yeah,
each unit, sorry, it's
and
above that one. It's that friendly unit leaders that are within that player's deployment zone. So I don't think in rollout you are changing that. So you, unless we're saying the same thing, but I'm thinking
yeah.
if you're outside the deployment zone, that is not your deployment zone.
I guess, yeah. I don't know.
Fair
That's
enough.
a weird one. That's a weird one.
So
Maybe
just take bombing run if you want to have arguments. Turn zero in your
yeah.
in your game. Might as well roll with it.
Take a
So
tank list with bombing run.
double
Yeah, no, I
double
guess
tank, double
we could
tank.
reach out to Alex or something and
Yeah,
find out. Hey,
that's fair.
that's a good one.
Yep,
Yeah, maybe it's already in the RRG and we just don't know.
yep, fair
But
enough. Okay, well let's talk about bombing run besides that point that just was just stuck in my brain and I wanted to share it with the masses. So let us know in chat what you think. Do you agree or disagree? Not that we have any agreement, but can you take it? Can you not? Let us know. Dustin's saying we were saying the same thing, so he agrees you cannot.
okay, fair enough. Yeah, that's I didn't even think about that, man. That's a weird one. But anyway, Um, so everyone, I've heard tale of, tauntauns are amazing on bombing run. I don't disagree with that whatsoever. I also have heard tale that like anything with a compulsory move is pretty darn good on bombing run. I mean, I also agree with that. Um, but I'm thinking just in general, something like a spurred dewback or an ATRT, just because of its base size and its ability to double move and not be killed super easily, um, is also potentially something interesting on bombing run. Um, so if you present like three dewbacks or three ATRTs, the chances that your opponent is going to kill all three of them in one or two turns is pretty unlikely just because they are like a little bit more defensive, unless you really put them out of position. And then I think like, man, you just double move with their big base, larger base size. Uh, they could get in and drop some bombs pretty early in the game. They're I, I've been surprised many times on like a battle line scenario at how, let's call it fast, an ATRT can be just by doing two sets of double moves. Like it could cover a lot of ground.
Do you know why I think that is, Joe? I think that I'm like you. I get surprised by, and my apologies, Facebook for whatever reason just dislikes my camera tonight. Never had this issue, but whatever. You can still hear my voice, hopefully. So, it'll just be a Joe show here tonight. But the I think the reason that we think things are much faster than they normally are is because we haven't really encountered a lot of missions or situations where you're double moving with those units.
Yeah.
RTs, what do? Aim, shoot. They're pillboxes effectively.
Yes.
We haven't really encountered a reason to do that. And I think now that we have reasons, we're going to be very surprised by the speed of these units.
Hmm.
And I, for one, like the idea that these units that were relatively one-dimensional, if you will, if I can use that phrase, are actually going to have some duality in their role.
Yeah.
So again, that saber tank can be maybe more versatile. It doesn't need to just throw big dice pools and be disappointed every turn when it doesn't kill a lot. And now it could be maneuvering and being a box. RTs can be, rushing up to kind of create a little bit of a early screen or a bombing run, if you will. Tauntauns aren't just going to need to like be melee every time. There's going to
Hmm.
be some duality in these units, and I
Yeah.
really think Vital Assets enhances and flushes that out a lot of times. I'm happy about it.
Yeah, and honestly, so like I've lost games of Breakthrough because I didn't kill ATRTs and then they double moved at the end and I was like, "Oh my God, that thing went halfway across the board." Like I was not prepared for that. Because normally you're right, they just move once and then just aim shoot the rest of the game most of the time.
Right.
But yeah, now you're looking at like a bombing run situation or even a breakthrough and you're like, "Oh man, these things are hard to kill, especially if you don't have a bunch of impact or anything like that, maybe a bunch of critical, but even I think critical is less reliable than impact when fighting armor. It's a little better than not having it, but it's you still got to look for that surge, right? So it's not as consistent as having impact, and if you don't have that, I don't think you're going to like easily kill 3 ATRTs. And the thing is too, most of these lists have ways to repair ATRTs. Even if you're taking the Republic, like R2 can heal an ATRT up, and that could be devastating. If your opponent uses 3 or 4 activations of shooting to do 3 wounds to an ATRT, and suddenly it's only got 1 wound on it, it feels really bad. It feels like they wasted half their turn doing absolutely nothing. And then that thing double moves and drops a bomb on you. It doesn't even like necessarily need to shoot, right? So there's situations like that you really got to watch out for. Also, something I think that's really smart. Looking at droidicas too, this might be a reason to like start taking droidicas again. I know a lot of people have cut them recently in favor of like going double the fall or going for the AAT or going for the commandos or even the new staps. But droidicas block ATRTs or other droidicas or anything else on that same base from being able to move. You
Mm-hmm.
can create a screen with them, and they're really fast.
Yeah. What about a limb viz double roly boy move?
Oh,
Right.
for sure.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, lots of stuff to think about. Lots of different ways to think about. Even if you're not bidding, think about how you want to veto as red player. Like if you don't have the bid, you want to still think, what is my list really good at? And
Right.
maybe if I've built a little bit of a skew, what are these like juicy objectives that I'm looking to really truly play?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe assume most opponents, at least like once we actually have access to this stuff at retail, maybe like in the later tournament seasons, or at least now when we're all playing TTS and everything's free. I think it's a fair assumption to assume most competitive players, at the very least, are probably going to buy vital assets. So they're probably going to have 1 or 2 of these objectives in their deck, most likely, is what I'm guessing. So
Right.
knowing what you're good at, knowing what your list performs well on, I think is going to be a big thing. Um, but yeah, man, bombing run, it's going to shake things up.
Another question, Joe, just before we move on for bombing run, and folks, it's totally a Facebook thing tonight. Like we haven't lost any audio here, so I think Facebook's not playing friendly. I was just having a look. It looks like Ecamm is not agreeing with Facebook here lately in the latest update. So I was just checking to see if anybody else had that issue. So we're going to be back and forth between Facebook and YouTube, but YouTube more the reasons, much more stable platform. So we'll let you guys know where we're going to go. So just some logistics I'll sort through there. But let me ask you this, Joe, just on that point where you were talking about ATRTs, is there maybe a case where if you know this is in your deck and you're able to somehow push or maneuver for it, or maybe this point is going to allow you to do that, do you think maybe there's a case where you aren't taking weapons on all of your RTs, or maybe none of them?
Well, okay, so in the Rebel version, I don't really like naked ATRTs, because I just don't think they bring any sort of respectable offensive potential whatsoever. And I don't really want to sink a bunch of points into like a gimmicky unit that's only there to just move and provide cover and be really fast and not really be able to kill much. It's kind of, I don't know. I like just putting rotaries or flamers on like the Rebel version and just making that like mandatory. With the Republic version, though, I think there's a really solid argument for naked ATRTs because of two things. One, they have a much better gun, like base gun. I think they have an RPS 6 on the rider, like the rocket launcher, which is just a lot better than the Rebel version. First of all, second of all, fire support's a thing. So fire supporting into a platform that upgrades your Z6 from having no surge suddenly to having surge to hit is going to make that unit's shots so much more effective. And third of all, and again, that allows you to save those surge tokens that you may or may not have for defense, which you're probably going to want. And then third of all, the Republic right now is a faction that has very expensive units in general. So you look at like an Overwatch Phase 2 unit, which is really popular right now, and it's like 91 points. So when you're talking about 91 point core units compared to the other factions who are taking like 63 point core units, you now have a lot more, you put a lot more stock and a lot more value in like as many cheap activations as you can get to pad out your numbers. R2D2 gets a lot more value. Naked ATRTs, I think they come in at like 65 points, suddenly become more appealing because it helps you boost yourself to that like 10 activation level. Um, However, I think that if you're gonna put a weapon on the ATRT in the Republic faction, I think you just go flamethrower, man. I think it's like the only choice, if you
Yeah,
ask me.
it's not a point savings of any kind, though, right?
It's not a point savings
Right.
at all, but you still have that awesome long range weapon that you can fire support into that
Yeah.
you would have got for taking it for free. And then you have now like something that's extremely anti B1, extremely anti Rebel Trooper. And when you're talking about playing these like bombing run objectives or breakthrough or even payload, you now have, and you want to actually push into someone's face, you now have these armored flamethrowers to shove in people's face,
Right.
which all infantry hates.
Yeah,
So,
I guess the context I was getting at, which is all relative points that you're making as well. I'm just looking at a couple things that I think that vehicle lists are going to potentially run into is the difficulty. Okay, Okay, so it seems let some guys in chat are letting us know. It seems like that Facebook's having an absolute freak out. So we will. Luckily, the nice thing is we still have a recorded version of this. So it's simulcasts, so we can get a cleaner version up to YouTube. So my apologies. I'm not sure what's going on with YouTube, but it's seemingly not on our end here. So, but the point about the RTs is that maybe potentially one weapon strip if you're going to run the triples is a nice way to get that bid in a vehicle list, which is sometimes comes at a premium. And also in the context of both bombing run and payload, the two objectives that we've talked about right now, I think that there's other roles that the RT can play. either shifting along the payload, blocking an opponent's payload, or running some bombs to the other end. So I think there's some nice ability. I agree fully that naked RTs in many other missions, where really they're your fire platform, they're your base, don't present very well and really are just activation padding. I think that a straight activation pad is not worth taking something, but I think that if you can maybe take it out of its primary role, but still have several secondary roles that it can fill, it makes that activation much more viable in a list. Makes me feel like what I quote unquote a dead activation. I don't want an RT to be, especially something that heavily invested. I don't want to call that a dead activation.
Yeah.
It's not a naked rebel trooper unit for me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, okay, so to kind of add, thinking back about bombing run and also even payload, just to go back to our Saturday cast, man, think about Cad Bane and his ability to teleport in these objectives, like bombing run, for example. Cad Bane might actually make for a really interesting choice in a bombing run mission for either teleporting close to their deployment zone or being able to get into their deployment zone and then teleport out with his token. So with his I forgot what the name of the token is. It's like here I am or something. Yeah, but yeah, here I am token. So yeah, there's you could do a lot. Man, Staps are really good at escorting the bomb and bombing run. Pretty much any compulsory vehicle, I think. So I don't think you're gonna want to put it on like generic core units. Like I think that's gonna be the like what's not a great idea because I think it's gonna be too like if they're on stormtroopers or rebel troopers or even clones, like I think it's just going to be too easy to like identify and kill those as they're making their way across the board compared to like faster vehicles and stuff. So,
Just on the topic of faster vehicles, Joe, let's go to another objective. We'll get one more done, and I see JP. Yes, sorry JP that you're having issues there. I don't think it's your local area at all. I think there's too many people in too many random locations to be having any sort of to be isolated to one person here. I think just as somebody said, we've been zucked here tonight. So fair enough. Let's go on to one more mission, but let's revisit James's question. So James has been asking here. I asked a couple times above there. So just to be clear, the land speeder is still not relevant. I think Joe May has an opinion about that actually being relevant. So let's maybe talk about in terms of missions, Joe. Or let me just present
yep.
this. What mission do you think the land speeder has some relevance in that's not one of bombing run or payload?
Not many breakthrough.
So and
Yeah.
that's my go-to too. So so Joe and I were
Yeah.
having a little bit of pre-chat around vehicles and kind of the missions that we thought, hey, if you're going to go vehicle heavy, if you're going to invest that, and you're able to pick what missions are you taking and what are you not. And so we both agreed: sabotage and moisture vaporators out, recover the supplies out, intercept the transmissions out, hostage exchange out, leaving us with breakthrough and key positions. So let's just talk about breakthrough for a second because I think it is quite relevant in the vehicle discussion. And so,
I
do
think,
you go ahead?
yeah. So with breakthrough, really, it's very similar to bombing run.
Right.
But the difference is you kind of want to. The only difference is with bombing run, at least my logic is the way that I would think to approach it is bombing run. I want to get my objective done and then just have it be done. So I'm probably going to look for the turn 2, 3, and 4 score. Whereas with breakthrough, it's like the end of the game. So you don't necessarily just want to rush into your opponent's deployment zone and try to sit there. Whereas in bombing run, you probably want to rush in and see if the detonation could actually do some damage to their army because it's happening early. That's the only, I think, really the difference. But I still think all the units that are good at bombing run are good at breakthrough also.
Can I tell you a really, really annoying, sick, and both awesome use of the land speeder in Breakthrough? Land speeder, R2.
Yeah. Yep.
Here I am with the land speeder. There's a point. Here I am with R2. There's a point. Here I
Yep.
am, secret mission. There's a point.
Yeah.
And man, that's not a lot of points to invest. And if it does nothing but hold out to make that score of 3, doesn't matter how much work you put in 6 turns. That
Yeah.
is annoying.
Basically, I think R2 is like the smartest reason to take a land speeder right now.
Yes.
Just putting R2 in a land speeder is like the land speeder play. I've heard tale of Sabine in a land speeder and getting like awesome explosion plays off, and that's totally a thing too. And that's kind of like a little bit of an older idea, but still totally like is a possibility, and maybe even more awesome with like a bombing run, for example. But yeah, right off the bat, when I'm thinking about the land speeder, I'm thinking, okay, it's just a little sports car I could put R2D2 in, take him across the map really safely. He could get out and repair it. Like
Yep.
there's a lot, it's like, or repair himself if it takes damage, which causes him to take damage. And if you got the points for it, you could throw a pretty strong ion weapon on the land speeder or a rocket, and both of them are pretty anti-armor. So,
Yeah, I think
yeah,
don't get me wrong. That land speeder can make its own hole to get through to the end zone. It's not like it just needs to sneak through, like between units kind of thing. It can punch its own hole. It's punchy. I
right.
just think
And if they and it,
go ahead.
yeah, I was gonna say if you're going like I look at a lot of these clone lists right now. And I've noticed I'm like they're all taking like it's like they take like one Overwatch mortar and a bunch of Z6s. And right there's just not a ton of anti-armor like on paper. So you've got these like sniper strike teams and all this stuff that these new cool stuff, ARC troopers and everything. And it's like if you can get your land speeder across the board without it dying because they couldn't roll crits against it because they were unfortunate and they didn't just have like built-in impact. And then all of a sudden you're just like in their back lines and you're taking out their sniper strike teams and stuff. Not only have you like escorted R2D2 and presented a real threat on like a breakthrough situation or a bombing run situation, but you've also potentially killed a couple activations and you've created a big enough distraction where your opponent has likely identified I cannot just ignore this land speeder that's bringing R2 because we're looking at 3 victory points for free.
Yep.
I probably have to divert and shoot at it. Now the rest of your army might be marching up the opposite side of the board or something.
Yep.
So I don't think it's bad at all. But I think it's very situational. And I think there's potential to make it a lot better if we get some strong units that are going to be good escorting in that thing. Man, Cassian and K2 in that thing, that's unexplored territory right now. Just saying. Like, they're so new. I have not witnessed anyone put Cassian in a land speeder. Maybe it's insane.
It could be.
We just got to wait and see. So I think there's a lot of stuff. I mean, something to think about. But I certainly wouldn't. I wouldn't throw that model away if you own it. That's all I'm saying.
So James is saying that it seems too specific. I think that, and you're probably speaking in relevant terms to like breakthrough being its kind of moment to shine. I don't think that it doesn't have a place, though, in doing the same ability in bombing run. I don't think that it doesn't have the ability to
payload.
And payload, exactly. So agreed.
And I'll tell you what, I'm not trying to come out here and say that my message is everyone should be playing the land speeder. The question was, is the land speeder bad? And I'm trying to give you reasons why I don't think it's just bad.
Like I said, I think the duality of the roles is so if we take vital assets out of the context and you're going to I don't even need to tell you this. How many land speeders did you see pre-vital assets and pre-R2? I can tell you that
I saw them when they first came out, and then I saw no one take them for a while.
Exactly. Then R2 came out, and then he's relevant, but he was relevant in the context that this is really good play and breakthrough. Now what we're saying is Vital Assets is out, and now I think that there's even more relevance for it. So as a unit becomes more and more relevant, as we're talking really tonight about, hey, here's some different roles for the Saber. Hey, here's some potential roles for a naked RT. Hey, here's some ways that Tauntauns can do something other than melee. Hey, here's why the T-47 could potentially come back and be a tool in your arsenal. So really truthfully, we want to look at these objectives saying that, hey, face value, the way to achieve victory is written there, but there's many
Yeah, I
paths
think
to victory is what we're trying to get at.
totally. I gotta say, if you're a Rebel player, break the chains of Luke and consider that there are other interesting options. And when you combine that with vital assets, there's a lot of interesting options. Rebels, I think, are like across the board the most flexible faction right now. They have so many different ways that they can build. They can go a full armor skew. They can go full speed, like Speed 3, Sabine and Tauntaun stuff. They can go like aggressive, strong force user, operative Luke. They can go ranged 4 gun line with FD turrets and DLTs. Like, there's a lot of different ways that that faction flexes, and I think you just got to find what's comfortable for you. But here's the big point I want to make about Rebels. It's the easiest faction to bid with. Yep. So if you build a gimmicky R2 Landspeeder list, you can probably also bid 20 points. Like, you don't need to put Luke in that list. You could probably get away with Leia or a generic, and you can still probably run that list at 780 and have it have all the necessary things it takes to win. And then you could force your blue player command deck, which means you can force those objectives that require speed and like breaking through. And then you could cut things that you're going to be weak at. Like, for example, you're probably going to be weak on key positions because you've got a compulsory vehicle. You're probably going to be weak on like intercept the transmissions because the land speeder can't score on it. So cut those, right? That's all I'm saying.
Well, no, something fairly interesting. It's not really that interesting, but I played Rebels competitively for a full year. The only thing I used at tournaments for a full year. And I've been playing since the game came out. I've never used Luke Skywalker in a single list ever of Rebels.
Yeah.
I mean, I've played against them like 50% of the games, but I don't think that you have to have Luke to have a great Rebel list. I think that Luke sometimes forces you to not be able to take maybe the variety of tools that I would like to take. I'm not, I mean, you guys know how I build lists, and Joe, I'm not really into that key focal point. I like to kind of take something like that I'd consider to be like medium to heavy in terms of like point investment, and then spam that to max efficiency, like 2 or 3 heavy units, and not necessarily skew to one character. In fact, I probably invest the least amount in my characters and generals because I feel that they're artificially targeted too much, and I'm not looking to draw attention to that. So just on your point about Luke, that, and I 100% agree. I think Rebels can flex hard on the bid. I think it's more difficult with the more vehicles you take, but I think that there may be some viability to drop some things that you may have considered an auto include previously on vehicles, just to kind of free up some points. So
I'm saying the old meta is super in flux, and the new objectives change things so much that you have to reevaluate almost every opinion we've had before Vital Assets came out.
Yep.
So where I once would have said I would never take a land speeder, I can now say, man, I could find you like several reasons why a land speeder could actually be really interesting.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. So that's just something. And I think that's kind of good for the health of the game, because that just means that the stuff that you buy and you like and you hobby up and you're proud of, you can probably find a way to take and make it work for you.
Yeah, I think general.
You just got to think about it. It's
right. And general list advice, I mean, and don't just take my word for whatever it is. If it's no value to you, then it's no value. But I think general list building advice when it comes to preparing for any games is that when you're putting units in your list, if you don't just like you go into a mission where plan A, B, and C, you really should define the roles of units in your army outside of just that one trick. Like if you're building a land speeder list for like, oh, I'm gonna go R2 breakthrough, and if I don't get breakthrough, I don't know what this land speeder's doing.
I'm gonna
That
lose.
is
Right.
really, really bad. And I mean
Mhm.
bad in the sense that you're not a bad list builder, but I just mean that's a bad feeling to have, and you really shouldn't
Yeah.
have that. Like, so if you're just like, okay, I'm going to take this rotary RT and it's going to be my base of fire, but you know what? If I really got to move, then this rotary is going to be presenting a front for my payload. Or you know
Yeah.
what? It's going to provide a little bit of fire in this hostage exchange for my extraction, or me to put pressure on my opponent. Same thing with a saber tank or an AAT. AAT is great if it can see things, but if it can't see things, what are you going to do? Are you just going to say this is a 200-point unit that's not doing anything right now? No, you're going to need to find ways to make it relevant. And so I think that when you're defining your unit capacity, figure out the roles that needs to play. You know, a B1
Yeah.
unit shouldn't just be there to die, because it's one of the most efficient units in terms of offensive output if you include a heavy. So its role
Yeah.
shouldn't be just to soak up shots to die. That may be one of its roles. But
Hmm.
man, are they fantastic to be just dump them on a VAP. Not only do they encircle
Yeah.
that they could just tap that VAP for days because they're tough to get off it based on bodies.
Hmm.
So their role of dying is actually the secondary role to them tapping a VAP more
Yeah.
efficiently than 4 naked rebel troopers. So just when you're thinking about these things and we're talking about these objectives in isolation, think about units and the roles that they play within the objective. It's not just there to do nothing. And don't think about a unit just because it can't score or move a box or escort a hostage doesn't mean that it's not viable and not contributing to path of victory.
Hmm. Very
So
true, man. And also just be prepared that you can have the most fantastic plan and it can crumble on turn one.
yeah.
I've watched an Alpha Strike do 4 wounds to Palpatine like in the deployment zone.
Hmm.
And it's like, well, he's literally useless, and my
Yeah.
entire plan is
My
done.
my now my now you'll die just got neutered. So
And yeah, well, like, what do I do now?
right.
Right? And they could be the same thing with the land speeder. Like, if you're like, I just need to play breakthrough, that's probably not great.
Yep.
But I mean, hey, the more objectives we get as this game gets older and older and like sticks around, the more we'll start to see objectives that kind of have the same or similar path to victories. And I think you can compare breakthrough and bombing run to each other. So if you build a list that's good at one, it's probably good at both. And now you have two objectives that you can probably win more often than lose on with a certain list.
Right.
So that's kind of interesting. I mean, so yeah, a lot to it. I know we've probably gone pretty long here. I know we've had some issues. I'm sure we can keep this conversation going for hours.
Yeah. We
Um,
can we can save a few for next time for sure. I think Facebook's decided to quit its fits here. It seems to be working acceptable now. So I think it was just a patch. I think we have to take into consideration that the pressures on bandwidths on all these sites is pretty significant right now. I know that lots of platforms have been having issues just dealing with
yeah,
the amount of users. So no, it seems to have stabled out here. So we'll live with that. We'll take it. Like I said, we'll have this content in other ways to consume, so you guys will still be able to hear all that good information. Good questions tonight, by the way, too.
yeah.
I think I'm just making sure we didn't miss too many. Oh, Dustin wanted to know about Cad Bane and do I have the rules page? We only have what we shared, but can you
Hmm.
reveal? Can you reveal? Here I am at the start of the turn, regardless whether you divulge or not. And
Yes.
so, yeah, there is a little bit. I can actually slide over to that page for you.
But yeah, the
There,
answer to that is yes. You can
yeah,
play. You can
it's right here.
forego. Yeah,
Yeah,
you can like if what you're asking is this, you can forego divulging.
yeah,
Okay, on deployment. You can still play that 3-pip on turn one as your normal command card. You're
correct.
only going to put one token down. If you want, you could put Here I Am down, and then you can immediately flip it at the start of the turn. And it's essentially like giving Cad Bane an extremely aggressive infiltrate.
Yep.
You can do that. Yep. About the rules questions, do you have an update on that? Because we reached out back to
Yeah.
FFG.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so we are going to post the content that we have on the Legion Academy site. That's going to be there, so people can go consume it there. I know grabbing screen captures is we've seen them all over. Joe and I were playing a little game in terms of kind of like the Where Waldo, spotting it all over the internet as it made its way through the world. I saw it in Germany and a few other Polish sites. So, but that's where you're going to be able to go and see it. So it'll be a little bit easier to kind of like screenshot or capture off there. So we aren't able to send the content out to individuals and things like that. So don't think that we're trying to hoard that information away. It's very public to consume, but you'll have to get it from the Legion Academy site or the Legion Academy podcast. You just screen capture us there. So I've just been getting a few requests here in the coming days, or the last few days rather. So that's basically where it will be. So yeah, yeah, go ahead, Joe.
And I was going to say, we do know this. I think this is probably not a secret anyway, given the track record. But we do know, after speaking with FFG, we do know that they do plan on eventually releasing their own article, like they do with all the other units, basically. So at some point that will be up. Don't know when, but there will be a Cad Bane like official article too.
Yeah, they're always catching up. I think the only one we're still waiting for is what was that? The Imperial Specialist article. Still holding out. I don't know what they do yet, so I'm just waiting for that one. So, yeah, but no, I'm not sure what happened. I got lost in the void for sure. But yeah, no, that was. I mean, we're again just really happy that FFG allowed us to do that, and so we want to make sure that we're adhering and sticking to all the rules because we'd like to be able to bring you guys content in the future. So, and hopefully you guys also enjoyed the Cad Bane special and want to see some more of those in the future as well. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So, Joe, we got through a few of those
Awesome.
tonight. We covered off most of the new ones. Maybe next week we'll look at some of the deployments, and I think that's maybe prudent because let's maybe see if we can, in the meantime, get the response back on that bombing run rollout combination. Be interesting to know. Just to, as you said, not kind of get that gotcha moment when you deploy out your vehicles and you have all the bombs attached to them and then immediately drop them as you can't attach them. So that just
and I know also we mentioned on Saturday we were probably going to be talking about Cad Bane lists and stuff this stream, but I think we might hold off a little bit just because I want the full spoilers on everything else that's
what's his other cards we don't quite know there. So
well, yeah, like and like what am I getting? What's the other BX droid's actual weapon? Stuff like that, right? That's going to have a big, like if I go out and tell you to build a 10 activation Cad Bane list that has triple strike team snipers and 5 E5Cs or maybe 2 rockets and Grievous, yeah, that's a good list, but is that list going to hold up in a few weeks when we find out what the other commando heavy is? Like, I want to know that information,
right?
So
I mean, we can plunk all these guys, like I said, in isolation, only to be. I think I had the show notes at the start there, only to find out that in 2 weeks' time that information is no longer valid or relevant or most efficient or even the most flavorful, right? So it's one of the things we both like and hate about this game is that sometimes things are moving so fast that they kind of fall out of pace. But if the game's shown us anything, we know things come back in. I think FFG's done a good job at making things relevant again, or potentially again twice. I loved Imperials. I played Imperials for the whole first year. Fantastic. And, then I just moved on to Rebels. And then I was like, oh, here's another shiny thing known as clones. And here I am. And, toying back with droids, and AAT comes out. So now I want to play droids. And then they got CAD coming out, but then ARC Troopers. I'm all over the place here. So it's hard to stay loyal when so many shiny objects are coming out. So, but it just depends on kind of your flavor. If you're playing it for most efficient, if you're playing it for because you have an attachment to the unit, or if you're playing it because you're faction loyal. There's lots of reasons to play factions, and there's no wrong reason, I should say. So
All right. Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, I think we've gone long enough here, so we'll wrap it up. Just want to say thanks for everyone for tuning in. LegionAcademy.net, check it out. Check out the YouTube channel and subscribe. The more people that subscribe, the easier it's going to be for us to want to do more giveaways.
Yep.
And we're going to be doing one more piece of news I want to announce, and maybe this I shouldn't have saved this for the end, but we're doing a massive overhaul on our website. So it looks okay right now. It's going to look really cool here in the next couple
Yeah.
of weeks. So
Exceptionally cool. So we're super proud and excited, and don't take the placement of this at 134 of the podcast to be any to be any indication of how excited we are. It's certainly awesome. So we don't have a whole lot to show right now, so we'll probably spend an entire episode kind of walking you guys through all the cool features that are on there. We have a couple things too we haven't even mentioned, so just throw those little tidbits, those breadcrumbs, if you will, here at the end of the episode. But stay tuned for that. Like I said, unboxing of an AAT whenever it arrives, hopefully by Friday. We'll get that up, and we're going to hopefully be able to be in an era where we can get you guys some more gameplay happening. So
sure.
that's it for now. We will post verbal updates, or written updates, if you will, about the poker tokens if we get any word tomorrow or the next day or the day after that, and we will keep you guys up to speed as we embark on this saga of tracking down missing packages. So it's a joyous adventure. Not really. But we'll catch you guys next time, and hopefully we'll have some happy news. So, I mean, I want to have my own tokens. Let's be perfectly honest. We want to get them to everybody, including myself. So let's. I have a vested interest in getting your guys' stuff at the same time getting my own. So, till next time, guys. Thanks for watching. Talk to you later.
Have a safe week, everyone. Take care.
Cheers. Cheers.